You don't spend 30 years in the army and come out soft. You learn to listen when others don't. And that's how I found out my wife was cheating on me, by doing what I do best. Paying attention. My name is Nathan Hall. 62 years old. Built solid, broad-shouldered, with faded tattoos from my time in the service. My body's got the wear and tear of a man who's seen things, done things, and lived through them. Spent my career in the army working strategic operations across the world, places most people can't pronounce. 30 years of my life given to a cause bigger than myself, earning medals and scars along the way. Now, I run a veteran support group in San Antonio, trying to keep other guys from losing themselves after service. It's not a bad life. Just a different one. I met Laura when I was stationed stateside for a while, back when she was young, wide-eyed, and talking about big dreams. Brunette, bright-eyed, always wearing something colorful. The kind of woman who seemed like she could bring life into a room just by walking in. I married her because she made me think I could have a normal life outside the uniform. Turns out she just liked the idea of the uniform more than the man wearing it. It was a Tuesday night when I heard her. Late. House was quiet except for the faint hum of the fridge and the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. I'd come home from the vet center, tired, same routine as always. Shower. Check security. Glass of bourbon. Bed. But tonight, Laura was on the phone in the next room, her voice low, careful, like she thought I wouldn't hear. I know, she whispered, breathy, like she was trying not to get caught. It's just Nathan's home, I can't talk long. A pause. Then softer, almost guilty, I miss you too. I didn't move. Didn't react. Years of training kept me still, kept my breathing even. I've been in situations where staying quiet meant the difference between life and death. This wasn't life or death, but it sure as hell felt like war. I let it play out. She kept talking. No, he doesn't know. He never notices. We just stay careful. Then a soft laugh, like the kind I hadn't heard from her in a long time. I closed my eyes, let the words sink in, let the anger roll through me like a slow-moving storm. No heat. No panic. Just cold, calculated certainty. When she finally hung up, I heard her walk past the bedroom door, probably heading to brush her teeth like nothing had happened. I stayed where I was, staring at the ceiling, going through the facts. Laura was cheating. And she thought I was too stupid to notice. The next morning, I watched her. Nothing obvious. Just little things. How she kept checking her phone, how she hesitated before saying, I love you, on her way out the door. Small details that told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't the kind of man to lose my head over this. Screaming? Begging? Not my style. I didn't get through 3 decades of combat by acting on impulse. I dealt in strategy. So I got to work. First, I checked the bank accounts. Nothing too suspicious, but there were a few random ATM withdrawals in areas she never had any reason to be in. A vet clinic? Interesting. I made a call. Kenneth Duncan picked up on the second ring. Nathan. What's up? Kenneth and I served together, ran military police operations in the Middle East before he got out and started his own private investigation firm. The guy had a nose for trouble, and more importantly, he had a way of making sure the right people found out about it. I need a favor, I said. Kenneth sighed. Yeah, that tone tells me this one's gonna be fun. What's the job? I gave him the basics. My wife. Suspicious behavior. A name, Dr. Owen Lopez. Kenneth let out a low whistle. Vet, huh? Real noble type. That'll play well in court. This isn't about court, I said flatly. It's about information. Got it. You want quiet or you want loud? Quiet for now. Kenneth chuckled. That's what they all say at first. I hung up and went back to my coffee, watching the door. Laura had walked out of that morning, pretending nothing was wrong. She thought I didn't notice. That was her first mistake. Her second? Thinking I'd ever let this slide. Kenneth worked fast. By the next evening, I had photos, timestamps, and enough evidence to make my next move. Laura wasn't creative, same routine, same lies. Thursday afternoons, she ran errands. Turns out those errands involved a quiet lunch at a cafe across town, her hand brushing against Owen Lopez's arm like they were in some kind of soft-focus romance movie. They weren't even careful. That told me 2 things. They thought I was too oblivious to catch on, and Owen was too naive to cover his tracks. I sat at my kitchen table, flipping through the photos Kenneth had sent over. Laura laughing, head tilted back, wine glass in hand. Owen leaning in, that soft-eyed expression that probably worked on every lonely woman who walked into his clinic. I called Kenneth. You want to do this slow, or you want to hit hard? He asked, voice low and amused like he already knew the answer. Slow. I'm setting the board first. I heard the click of his lighter on the other end. All right. What's next? The house, I said. Laura had no idea, but when I came back stateside, I'd made sure my name was the only one on the mortgage and the deed. At the time, it was a precaution. Now, it was my best weapon. That evening, I walked into the bank, shook hands with Tom Calloway, my financial guy, an old buddy from the service who'd traded battlefield strategy for wealth management. Nathan, he said, leaning back in his chair. Been a while? Yeah. Need to move some things around. I slid a folder across the desk. House, assets, everything. Lock it down. Tom glanced through the paperwork. Trouble? Not yet, I said. He nodded, no further questions. That's why I trusted him. Within the hour, everything was finalized. Laura could pack her bags tomorrow and she wouldn't have a damn thing to her name. The next morning, she kissed my cheek before heading out, same routine. Same lie. I'll be home late, she said. Grocery shopping, maybe a coffee with Sarah. I watched her grab her purse, tuck her hair behind her ear like she always did when she was nervous. If she thought I was buying it, she was dumber than I thought. I gave her a slow nod. Sure. Don't wait up. By noon, I was parked across the street from Owen's clinic. The place was small, tucked between a laundromat and a nail salon. The kind of place you'd drive past without a second thought. I watched as Laura's car pulled up, saw her step out, adjusting her shirt in the side mirror. Owen met her at the side door, quick glance around before letting her in. Pathetic. I could walk in there right now. End it in one move. But that would be emotional. And I don't make emotional decisions. Instead, I called Travis Butler, a guy who saw more from the front seat of his cab than most people ever did standing still. Travis picked up after the second ring, voice scratchy like he'd just woken up. You need a ride or a favor? Favor, I said. He grunted. Figures. Need eyes on a certain vet clinic. A guy named Owen Lopez. Silence. Then a dry chuckle. Oh yeah. I know him. Been driving his girlfriend around for weeks. I sat back, gripping the wheel. That's so. Yeah, she's always in a rush. Keeps her head down. Smells expensive. A pause. Didn't think she was yours. She's not anymore. Travis let out a low whistle. Damn. All right, you want details? Just a timeline, I said. When she leaves, where she goes after. Keep it clean. You got it. I hung up. Step 2 was in motion. I wasn't just going to catch them, I was going to control the entire downfall down to the last detail. That night, I sat on the back porch, watching the sun dip low over the trees. The house was quiet, but I could feel the storm building. Laura walked in, tossed her keys on the counter, and stretched like she'd had the longest, hardest day in the world. Traffic was terrible, she sighed. Sarah wouldn't shut up about her new boyfriend. I took a slow sip of my bourbon, not even bothering to look at her. Yeah? I said. Sounds rough. She hesitated. Just for a second. She knew something was off. Yeah, she said again, softer this time. Then she walked past me, heading toward the bedroom like nothing had changed. But everything had. And in a matter of weeks, she'd know it too. By the following week, I had everything I needed. I knew where they met, how long they stayed, even which entrance Laura used to avoid being seen. Owen Lopez had a routine, early morning surgeries, long lunch breaks, and a habit of leaving his office door unlocked. The kind of carelessness that told me he never expected consequences. Laura wasn't much better. She still came home every night, still played the role of a loving wife, but I saw the cracks now. She laughed a little too hard at dinner. Kept her phone face down on the table. Checked the driveway before stepping inside like she expected something to be waiting. She didn't know I was the one waiting. On Thursday, I moved the first piece into place. The grocery store wasn't far from Owen's clinic, just a few blocks over. Small, local place, one of those family-owned stores where the cashier knew most of the customers by name. I parked a few spots away, waited. Laura pulled in at 4:15. Right on schedule. She stepped out wearing that bright yellow sundress she always wore when she wanted to feel good about herself. The kind of dress a woman wears when she wants to be noticed. Noticed by someone who wasn't me. I waited 10 minutes, then followed. Inside, I grabbed a cart, pretended to browse. Kept my distance but made sure I was in her line of sight. She wasn't expecting me here. That was the point. She lingered in the produce aisle, scrolling through her phone, biting her lip. I watched her eyes dart up, scan the store, then go back to the screen. Waiting for a message? A signal? I moved to the checkout line behind a woman with a cart full of baby formula. That's when I saw Emily, the young cashier, ringing people up. Early 20s, dark circles under her eyes, moving through the motions like she'd rather be anywhere else. Laura walked past her, headed for the door. Emily barely looked up, but I caught the shift in her eyes. A flicker of recognition. Hey, I said as I stepped forward. Busy today? She glanced up, saw me, and straightened a little. Always. I handed her a few things I didn't need, some jerky, a 6-pack of beer. That woman just now, brunette, yellow dress. She come here often? Emily scanned the items, shrugged. Yeah. Usually around this time. Always alone? That hesitation again. Just for a second. She meets people, she said finally, keeping her voice low. Sometimes a guy. Scrubs, salt and pepper hair. He waits outside, they leave together. I nodded like I didn't care, like I wasn't already 2 steps ahead. You ever talk to her? Not much. She's polite. Doesn't like small talk. Smart woman, I said, pushing a 20 across the counter. Keep the change. She pocketed the bill without another word. She didn't ask questions, and I respected that. Laura had no idea, but her private little world was starting to come apart. That night, I made my next move. I waited until Laura was asleep, then pulled out my laptop and opened a secure folder I kept for insurance policies. Copies of financial records, property deeds, joint accounts. It didn't take long to adjust the paperwork, securing every last asset under my name. By the time I was done, if she walked out, she'd be walking out with exactly what she brought into this marriage, nothing. And if she wanted a fresh start with Owen Lopez, he'd be starting fresh too. The next day, I made sure the right people got the right information. A simple email to Laura's father. Anonymous with attachments. No message. Just facts. A forwarded bank statement. A few photos of her and Owen in his car. A timestamp. I knew William Warren well enough to know he wouldn't make a scene. He was old school, respected, the kind of man who built reputations and tore them down just as fast. He'd let the information sink in. Let the disappointment set deep. Then, when the time was right, he'd cut her off at the knees. Laura had spent years riding on his good name. That was about to end. The last thing I did was stop by Travis's cab. He was parked outside a dive bar off Main, feet up on the dash, flipping through a newspaper. When I knocked on the window, he rolled it down and smirked. Tell me you need a ride and not another favor. I tossed $100 bill onto the passenger seat. Need you to talk to a few people. Travis picked up the bill, flicked it between his fingers. Gonna need a little more detail than that. Word needs to get out about Owen Lopez. Nothing direct, just some offhand mentions. People talk. They always do. Travis grinned, tucking the bill into his jacket. Consider it done. As I walked away, I felt it, the shift. The game wasn't over. Not yet. But the board was set and the pieces were moving. Laura thought she was getting away with it. She had no idea she was about to lose everything. Saturday morning, I sat on the back porch with my coffee, watching the sun burn through the haze. The house was quiet except for the faint rustling of the oak trees and the distant hum of a lawnmower down the street. Laura was still asleep, curled up like she hadn't spent the last 6 months sneaking around behind my back. By now, the word was out. Travis had done his job well. A few offhand remarks at the right barstools, a casual story dropped into the wrong ears. Nothing blatant, nothing traceable. Just whispers, the kind that grew legs and walked on their own. San Antonio wasn't a big city when it came to reputation. A name like Owen Lopez's wouldn't survive long once people started talking. I took a sip of coffee, letting the bitterness sit on my tongue. It wouldn't be long now. At 8:30 sharp, my phone buzzed. Kenneth. Morning, I said. He chuckled. Morning, Nathan. Thought you'd like to know our boy Owen had a hell of a night. I leaned forward. Go on. He had an incident at the clinic yesterday. Somebody called in a complaint. Apparently, a woman's dog died after a routine checkup and she's convinced it was negligence. Couple more pet owners have come forward saying they had concerns about his practice. Kenneth paused, amused. Word spreads fast. I smirked. Shame. Guy seemed like such an upstanding citizen. Oh, sure. And totally not the kind of guy who screws around with married women in his back office. People putting the pieces together? Kenneth clicked his tongue. Yep. The women at the clinic are talking. Staff turnover's been high. Some old employees are suddenly real eager to share how Dr. Lopez's professional relationships might not be so professional. If you were looking for dirt, this well's getting deep. I checked my watch. Laura would be up soon. Good, I said. Keep me posted. I hung up, stood stretched. The day was just getting started. Inside, I found Laura in the kitchen, standing at the counter with her phone, scrolling like she was waiting for something. She hadn't noticed me yet. I let the silence drag. Finally, I spoke. Expecting a message? She flinched just a little, then turned and forced a smile. Morning. I nodded at her phone. Who's got you so distracted? She hesitated. Oh, just Sarah. She wants to grab lunch later. I pulled the fridge open, grabbed the orange juice, took my time pouring a glass. That right? You've been seeing a lot of Sarah lately. She gave a tight little laugh. Yeah, we've just been catching up. I turned, leaned against the counter, glass in hand. I wanted to see if she'd hold the lie. If she'd double down. She did. It's just nice, she said. Having girl time. I nodded slowly, then said, you still talk to Owen? Her grip tightened on her phone. Just for a second. What she said too quickly. I took a sip watching her. Owen Lopez. The vet. She forced another laugh, shaking her head. I mean, I know who he is. We took Daisy there a couple times. Why? Ran into someone who said you two were close. Her smile faltered. Just a hair. Who? Doesn't matter. I set the glass down. What matters is whether they were lying. She straightened, trying to find her footing. I don't know what you're talking about. You sure about that? She let out a breath, rubbing her temple. Nathan, where's this coming from? I stepped closer, lowered my voice just enough. I'll ask you one more time. You still talk to him? Her throat bobbed. She knew. She knew I knew. Then she did what I expected. She pivoted. Nathan, you've been stressed lately, she said, tone shifting, trying to make this my problem. Ever since retirement, you've been different. Maybe we should talk. Really talk. I let out a low chuckle. You want to talk now? She sighed, pressing her fingers to her forehead. I don't know what you think is going on, but... My phone buzzed. I pulled it out, glanced at the screen. Travis. Hold that thought, I said, answering. Travis didn't bother with pleasantries. You should come down to the clinic. I kept my eyes on Laura. Why? Owen's having a real bad morning. Cops are outside. Laura's face drained. I smiled. Be right there. I hung up, grabbed my keys, and walked to the door. Stopped just before stepping out. Turned back. Laura stood frozen, her face a war zone of panic and forced calm. I held her gaze, then said, we'll talk when I get back. And then I left. The drive was quick. By the time I pulled up, a small crowd had gathered outside the clinic. A police cruiser sat parked at the curb. A woman stood near the door, arms crossed, voice raised in frustration. Travis was off to the side, leaned against his cab, grinning like a man who just hit the Nathan pot. I stepped up next to him. Fill me in. Travis gestured with his chin. That lady over there? Her cat died after a surgery Owen performed. She's convinced it was negligence. And looks like she's not the only one. Inside the clinic, I could see Owen, pale, sweating, talking to an officer. The kind-eyed, soft-spoken, gentle vet now looked like a man barely keeping it together. Travis exhaled. Rumors are getting worse. Clients dropping appointments. People talking about his extracurriculars. He chuckled. Man's about to have a real bad month. I watched Owen run a hand through his hair, his expression pure desperation. The cracks were showing. Good. I turned back to Travis. Keep watching. He smirked. You got it. I walked back to my truck, slid inside, and took a deep breath. One more move and this game was over. Laura had spent months making me look like a fool. Now it was her turn to lose everything. By the time I got back home, Laura was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping her steady. She didn't look up when I walked in. I shut the door, set my keys down slow. Anything you want to tell me? Her fingers tightened around the mug. She inhaled sharply, held it, then let the breath out. She was cornered. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. I pulled out a chair, sat across from her, and let the silence stretch. She was waiting for me to explode, to start yelling. She wanted a reaction she could latch onto, twist, turn into something that made her the victim. I wasn't giving her that. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolled through the photos Kenneth sent me, and slid the screen across the table. She didn't touch it, but she didn't need to. She knew what was on there. Owen's falling apart, I said, keeping my voice even. His clients are leaving. His employees are talking. His reputation's shot. I leaned back. And I haven't even done the worst of it yet. Her jaw clenched, but she still wouldn't meet my eyes. Are you proud of this? Proud? I scoffed. No, but I am satisfied. She swallowed hard. Nathan, I never wanted to hurt you. I smiled, slow and cold. That right. She reached for my hand, but I pulled back before she could touch me. Her face fell. You don't understand, she whispered. I felt like I was suffocating. You were always so controlled, so focused on your own world. Owen, he listened. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. Yeah, I bet he did, I said. Real good at that, wasn't he? Listening, nodding along. making you feel like the center of the goddamn universe. I tilted my head. Did he ever tell you you'd have to leave this house? That he'd be able to support you once I was gone? Her face went pale. That's what I thought. I stood up, taking my phone back. Because here's the thing, Laura. I don't need you. I don't need him. But you needed me. And now you have nothing. She shot up from her chair, voice trembling now. Nathan, wait. I held up a hand. Save it. She blinked rapidly, like she was trying to figure out which angle might still work. She looked at me like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. A problem she hadn't expected. I'll pack my things, she said finally, voice small. I nodded. Yeah, you will. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something else, then thought better of it. She turned, walked toward the bedroom. I followed, leaned against the doorframe as she grabbed a suitcase and started shoving clothes inside. I sent everything to your father, I said casually. Figured he'd appreciate knowing what his daughter's been up to. Her hands froze on a blouse. She turned, mouth slightly open, genuinely shocked for the first time. You didn't. I did. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. He won't believe you. He doesn't have to. I crossed my arms. He's got the proof. She slumped onto the edge of the bed. You really want to ruin me, don't you? No, Laura. I stared at her, expression flat. I want you to face the consequences. She closed her eyes, shoulders shaking. Not crying. Not yet, but close. I pushed off the doorframe. You've got an hour. Then I walked away. I went back outside, let the warm air hit me. Sat on the porch with my drink, listening to the wind in the trees, the quiet sounds of a life resetting. A half hour later, her car pulled out of the driveway. And that was that. A week passed. The house was quiet now, the kind of quiet that used to feel unsettling but had started to feel like peace. No more late-night whispers. No more watching my wife glance at her phone like she was waiting for something better than what she had. Just me, the steady hum of the AC, and the weight of a life that finally felt back in my hands. Word about Owen spread faster than even I expected. His clinic took a hit, bad enough that he had to cut his hours. Clients canceled appointments. Staff quit. The board overseeing veterinary practices started sniffing around, wondering if there was truth to the rumors. Maybe he'd recover from it. Maybe not. Either way, I wasn't losing any sleep over it. Laura tried calling once. I didn't pick up. That was 2 days ago. Since then, nothing. I sat in my truck outside Kenneth Duncan's office, watching the sun dip behind the skyline, the glass buildings catching the last bit of light before the city settled into night. I had one last thing to take care of. Inside, Kenneth leaned back in his chair, boots propped on the desk, flipping through a thick manila folder. She's staying at her dad's place, he said, tossing a photo onto the desk. Laura, standing on the balcony of her father's high-rise condo, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. I picked it up, studied it. That go over well? Kenneth smirked. What do you think? William's pissed. Cut her off financially. Told her she can stay as long as she wants. But she's getting no money, no connections, and no easy way out. He pulled another paper from the file. Divorce is moving fast, too. That prenup you had? Rock solid. She gets whatever's in her personal account. That's it. I set the photo down. And Owen? Still scrambling, trying to hold on to his practice, but people talk. And San Antonio ain't as big as people think. He leaned forward, tapping the folder. You want the full ruin? Or you good with this? I thought about that. I could push harder. Make sure Owen never worked another day in his life. But I already had what I wanted. I'm good, I said, standing. Kenneth grinned, shaking his head. Cold as ever, Hall. I smirked. Efficient. We shook hands and I left. I drove with the windows down, letting the warm night air fill the cab. I should have felt something more. Relief. Satisfaction. Something. But all I felt was a steady, quiet certainty. This was how it had to be. A few blocks later, I pulled into a quiet bar on the edge of town. Inside, the place was half full. Old regulars, young guys trying to drink away their problems, a few vets I recognized from the support group. I took a seat at the bar. The bartender, Danny, nodded at me. The usual? Yeah. He poured the bourbon neat, slid it over. I took a slow sip, scanning the room. A fresh start. That's what this was. Maybe not the kind most people expected, but it was mine. A voice cut through my thoughts. Didn't peg you for the drinking alone type. I turned. Philip. My son. He stood there, hands in his pockets, looking so much like me at his age it was unsettling. We hadn't talked much since he moved out to Houston. Too many years lost to deployments, missed birthdays, conversations that never happened. I set my glass down. Didn't think you'd show. He smirked. Neither did I. I nodded toward the empty stool. Sit. He hesitated, then did. Danny raised an eyebrow at him. I'll take a beer, Philip said. I studied him, the sharp lines of his face, the tension in his shoulders. He wasn't a kid anymore. Hadn't been for a long time. So I said, You heard. Philip let out a dry chuckle. Dad, everyone's heard. I nodded. Took another sip. What do you think? He ran a hand through his hair, exhaled. I think Mom made her choices. I looked at him, waiting. And I think, he scratched the side of his jaw, debating his next words. I think I get you a little better now. I didn't speak right away. Just let that sit between us. Philip looked down at his beer, shaking his head. When I was a kid, I used to think you didn't care. That you were too busy being a soldier to be a dad. I admitted. Doesn't mean I didn't care. He huffed out a laugh. Yeah. I get that now. Silence settled. Then finally he raised his bottle. To clean breaks. I lifted my glass. To new starts. We drank. Maybe this wasn't the ending I expected. But it was the one I earned. The sun was just starting to set when I pulled into the lot behind the Veterans Center. I'd started coming here more often lately, not because I needed it, I never needed anything, but because some of these younger guys did. Fresh out of the service, still wearing that look I recognized too well. The one that said they weren't sure how to exist in a world that moved too slow, spoke too soft, and didn't give a damn about what they'd been through. Inside, the place was the same as always. A few guys drinking coffee, others playing cards, a couple just sitting in the quiet, staring at nothing. It wasn't therapy, but it was better than a bottle and a loaded gun. Kenneth was there, leaning against the counter, flipping through an old magazine like he had all the time in the world. He looked up when I walked in, smirked. You finally gonna admit I was right? I grabbed a coffee, took a slow sip. About what? He tossed the magazine down. About the fact that you actually look. I dunno, settled. I grunted. I don't settle. Yeah. Keep telling yourself that. He crossed his arms, watching me. So, how's the kid? I nodded. Good. You two actually talk now, or is it just beer and awkward silences? I smirked. A little of both. Kenneth chuckled, shaking his head. Progress. I scanned the room, spotted a young guy, maybe mid-20s, sitting alone at the far table. New face. Looked like he hadn't slept in a week. I nodded toward him. What's his story? Kenneth followed my gaze. That's Ryan. Army 2 tours, came back a few months ago. Been couch surfing, trying to figure out what's next. I studied the kid a second longer, then finished my coffee. I'll talk to him. Kenneth smirked. Look at you, Hall. Almost like you got a purpose or something. I ignored him, walked over, pulled out the chair across from Ryan. The kid looked up, tired eyes darting over me, assessing, the way soldiers do. You new here? I asked. He nodded. Yeah. First time. You got a place? A muscle twitched in his jaw. Not really. I leaned back. I got a buddy who runs a contracting gig. Ex-military. Good pay, no bullshit. You work. Ryan hesitated. Yeah. Back home, I did construction. Then you start Monday. He blinked. Just like that. I shrugged. You show up on time, work hard, keep your mouth shut when it counts, it'll stick. Ryan exhaled, like he wasn't used to things being that simple. Yeah. Yeah, okay. I pushed my empty coffee cup aside, stood. See you around. He nodded, something like relief creeping into his tired face. As I walked back toward the door, Kenneth raised an eyebrow. That was quick. Didn't need to be long. Kenneth chuckled. Guess not. Outside, the air was cooling down. The kind of Texas evening that reminded me of long drives with the windows down, back when life was simpler. Before deployments. Before betrayals. Before I'd learned the hard way that trusting the wrong person could cost you more than war ever could. I got in my truck, started the engine, and just sat there for a moment. The past had its place. It just wasn't in front of me anymore. Laura? Gone. Owen? Ruined. My name? Still solid. I pulled out of the lot, heading toward a future that, for the first time in a long time, was entirely mine.